We talk about morality, ethics, religion, society, countries. Her mouth curved faintly as if they arrived with the earth itself. I listened without interruption now. Something inside me had become still enough to hear her fully. But look closely, she continued. None of those things existed in the beginning. Her hand fell back into her lap slowly. When survival stopped consuming every waking second of human life, the mind finally had room to turn inward, to question itself, to ask why suffering existed, why death existed, why loneliness existed. The morning light had reached her completely now. And because endless questioning exhausts the human brain, she said softly, we started creating answers. I watched her fingers lace together loosely. Answers became beliefs, beliefs became structures, structures became identities. Religion was one of them, she said, not because humans were stupid, but because humans were afraid. The sentence entered me sharply. We wanted meaning badly enough to create permanence and uncertainty. Her eyes lifted toward mine again. If creation exists, then there must be a creator too. That idea comforts us. Her voice carried no ridicule, only observation. Different geographies created different fears, different needs, different myths, different gods. The light shifted across the floorboards slowly while she spoke. And then eventually, people stopped relating to religion as enquiry. A pause. They began wearing it as identity. Something inside my chest tightened faintly. I thought of borders, wars, families. To desperate human need to belong somewhere. To survive together, she continued, humans formed communities, but communities eventually required categories, and categories require separation. Her eyes held mine steadily now. Class, religion, ethnicity, nations. The words landed one after another like stones entering still water. I blinked slowly, trying to follow the shape of what she was saying as if it unfolded something inside me. And that explains the obvious, the divisions, I whispered finally. All of them. Her lips curved softly. Exactly. Then silence returned again, but this time it no longer felt empty. But if we see all of this so clearly, I asked quietly, my fingers absent mindedly tracing the seam of the couch beneath my palm, why do we still keep building these structures around ourselves? She looked at me for a moment, then smiled, almost amused by the tragedy of the question itself. Truth, she repeated gently. The word lingered in her mouth like something fragile. Then she leaned her head back against the couch and exhaled through her nose, staring at the ceiling fan rotating lazily above us. What is truth? She murmured. If not just one less lie? My brows pulled together faintly. The morning had brightened around us by then. Light rested quietly across the floorboards, and the marigolds on the table had begun curling more at the edges, their fragrance warmer now, denser. She kept them while speaking. We think truth is clean, absolute, final, a small pause. But it never is. Her fingers moved slowly over the fabric beneath her hand. It's contradictory, primitive and evolved at once, cruel and compassionate at once, pure and contaminated at once. Something about the way she spoke made the farmhouse feel smaller suddenly, as if the walls themselves were listening. We are sitting inside a structure made from stripped life. Her eyes moved around the room, wood cut from forests, leather peeled from skin, cement poured over soil that once breathed. The words entered me physically. I became aware of the floor beneath my body again. The walls, the roof, everything suddenly felt borrowed. Who gave us the right? She asked. The question landed without aggression, which somehow made it worse. I opened my mouth briefly, then closed it again. Outside, the wind moved with a dry whisper. We used intelligence to distance ourselves from nature, then called that distance progress. Her voice remained calm, almost frighteningly calm. We built comfort first because survival was hard. Then comfort became privilege, privilege became luxury, luxury became identity. I felt my chest tighten quietly. And after that, consumption became anesthesia. The sentence entered me like a blade sliding slowly beneath ribs because I understood it instantly. She looked at me then. And does any of it actually fill the void? She asked. Her voice had lowered by then, gentler. The question barely crossed the space between us before it reached somewhere painfully intimate inside me. No, it doesn't. I know that answer before my mind does. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear my own breathing. Then she spoke again. Who decided this land belongs to us? The rivers, the mountains, the forests. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table absent mindedly. We claim ownership over things that existed long before us. If killing a human being sends you to prison, but killing an animal places it on your plate, she turned towards me slowly. Who exactly decides which life carries more value? I felt something shift uncomfortably beneath my skin. And then we divide people into categories: moral, immoral, civilized, uncivilized. A faint smile crossed her mouth, as though consciousness evolves in straight lines. The words settled heavily inside the room. Slavery was once legal, she said softly. Women were denied education. Entire communities were treated as less than human because the structures of that time benefited from them. Her eyes did not leave mine now. Caste, race, gender, religion. Each word arrived slower than the last. One era calls something ethical, another era calls the same thing monstrous. So, what is truth then? She asked gently. I didn't answer. Couldn't. She leaned slightly toward me. Most of what we call morality is simply the current limit of human self awareness. The sentence hollowed something inside me completely because suddenly history no longer felt distant. It felt alive, still happening inside us, around us. We romanticize love because humans are terrified of being seen, unseen. Her voice carried no cynicism, only bearable understanding. We turn connection into possession, into permanence, into proof that we matter to somebody. The marigolds trembled lightly as wind entered through half open window. But existence without constant validation is very quiet. I watched her profile in the morning light, and human beings are frightened of the quiet. Silence followed, dense, breathing, alive. And somewhere inside that silence, I felt it. Something unsettling, the beginning of my own dismantling. Then what is the end of it? I asked, finally. My voice came out quieter than I intended. The morning had fully settled by then. Sunlight stretched lazily across the floor near our feet. And how do we fix something like this? She didn't answer immediately. She just watched me, patiently, as though she knew the answer had not finished forming yet. I rubbed my palms together absent mindedly, feeling the roughness that starvation had left behind my skin. You're right. Everything is subjective. The words tasted strange in my mouth now, not intellectual anymore, terrifyingly real. The entire world is divided into consumable identities. I looked around the farmhouse slowly while speaking. The couch, the marigolds, the glass on the table, even the softness around us suddenly carried the weight of excess. Something as primitive as smell can separate human beings, I murmured. Her eyes remained on me quietly. I can afford scented soaps, oils, clean clothes, hot water. My fingers curled loosely into my palms. That places me into one category. Someone else who cannot afford those things becomes another. I swallowed. And somehow we call this civilization. The sentence sat heavily between us because for the first time I wasn't speaking in abstraction anymore. I was speaking from the body, from hunger, from survival, from the memory of rotting alive on this very floor while dignity peeled away layer by layer. I looked toward the kitchen unconsciously, toward the running tap, the stocked shelves, luxury, no worse, security. There's something deeply disturbing about all of this, I whispered. My chest tightened slowly as thoughts continued surfacing faster than language could organize them. We call ourselves conscious beings while building systems entirely dependent on exclusion. Afiami shifted slightly beside me but did not interrupt. We create shells, communities, economics, nations, ideologies. The words kept arriving now, and then we spend entire lifetimes protecting those shells from collapse. Outside, the wind struck the windows briefly, a dull sound. And inside those structures, I looked at my own hands. Everything gets divided again: wealth, capital, power, excess, safety. The sentence exhausted me merely speaking it aloud because I could suddenly see it. The invisible hierarchy wrapped around every human interaction I had ever known. And someday, another structure will replace this too. I looked forward towards her, and then we become the outcasts. The silence after that felt cold, like landing barefoot inside water. Who even decides authority? My voice cracked slightly. Who decides what becomes normal enough to survive? Her face softened almost painfully at that. It's a vicious loop, I whispered. The words fell out of me like confession now. I leaned back against the table slowly, staring toward the ceiling. To some extent, maybe that's why I've always resisted certain structures. The fan rotated above us lazily. Society, family, belonging, marriage. The words moved through my head like inherited furniture inside a house I had never fully entered. If people can be convinced that permanence is necessary, I said slowly, trying to follow my own thought as they formed, their entire industries survived through that belief. My breathing had changed by then, slower, heavier. Houses, furniture, weddings, status, domestic labor, consumption. I rubbed my thumb unconsciously against my fingertips. People begin building identities around maintaining structures they are taught to desire. She still hadn't interrupted me once. That frightened me more than disagreement would have. And companionship, I murmured. The word lingered painfully. Even that becomes transactional sometimes. I looked away toward the marigolds. We stop seeking growth. We start seeking emotional guarantees. The realization entered me as sharply as I said it aloud. That's why dismantling art scares people, I whispered. My eyes lifted toward the abandoned paintings scattered around. Real art destabilizes identity. Real cinema does. Real music does. A laugh escaped me then. But hollow validation, that sells beautifully. The farmhouse became silent again, not empty, listening. And somewhere inside that silence, I felt something terrifying unfold quietly beneath my ribs. Awareness. The kind that changes the shape of your life once seen clearly through. Silence rested between us afterward. The kind that arrives between two ways where the sea looks temporarily still while something enormous gathers underneath. The farmhouse had softened into evening again by then. Light entered through the windows in tired gold fragments touching the edges of the table, the abandoned paint tubes, her hands. I stared at them for a long time before speaking. Why do we do it, Afiami? She looked away and then toward me immediately. The questions came slowly at first, then all at once. Why do I destroy the people I love the most? My throat tightened around the words. Why do I sabotage the very thing I crave? A pause, my chest hurt. Where is the way out of this constant exhaustion, this weight? I looked down at my own hands helplessly. How do I survive myself? The tears slipped down without resistance now, just warmth running down skin. And how do I repent? The last question barely made it out of my mouth. She stayed quiet, long enough for my breathing to become uneven. Then finally, softly, she said, I don't know. The honesty of it shattered me more than certainty would have. She looked away briefly toward the window, then back at me. But maybe, she said carefully, you begin with forgiving yourself.